I'm just the warm-up act, so Soren is going to go into I suppose, the nitty-gritty of the transformation or data harmonization that we've carried out in Northern Ireland. I'm just going to set the scene a little bit of, I suppose, the structure of our portal and what we're actually trying to do. So Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. We're this little bit over to the left. We form a land border with Ireland, and we have decided a little bit of the structure chart. Although DEFRA, are the main member state body for coordinating Inspire for the UK, we as the devolved administration are sort of, I suppose, doing our own coordination in liaison with DEFRA. So each of the devolved administrations, ourselves, Land and Property Services in Northern Ireland, the Scottish Government and the Welsh Government, are all coordinating our own and doing it, I suppose, hand in hand of implementing Inspire in line with our own GI strategies, of which we all have. So Northern Ireland decided to build a centralised portal, a central system for everybody to use, rather than each organisation having to go out and procure the tools for Inspire. So it's hopefully a one-stop shop for all of our Inspire needs and for some of our GI strategy needs as well. We've got the metadata tools on it, view services, download services, and also transformation tools built in. It's Esri built the system for us, and Conterra have done some of the work in relation to the licensing and the transformation. So the goals, I suppose, of the portal: provide our solution for Inspire, to interface with the UK's portal as well, and also to comply with some of the objectives of our GI strategy and trying to, I suppose, encourage data sharing and trying to get people to actually use the data in earnest. And hopefully then to drive what we hope to be the whole next generation of spatial data infrastructure in Northern Ireland by bringing, I suppose. So for Annex 1 and Annex 2, at the moment we've identified that we've got 53 datasets, different organisations for Annex 1 and Annex 2. So we're going to have to transform those datasets. For Annex 3, we at the moment don't really have a clue. We're definitely into hundreds, probably 400, 500. We've no idea yet. We're still trying to identify the organisations responsible. But because then we've built the centralised portal, we're going to create the tools for people to be able to transform. So we held an initial transformation workshop back in, I think it was November in Northern Ireland. Soren from Conterra came over and sat with us, and we locked ourselves in a room for a week, and with the various representatives from our own Land and Property Services, and also representatives from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And these were the four main data sets that we initially concentrated on to transform: administrative boundaries, our cadastral parcels, protected sites, and our addresses, our national address database. So I suppose in one way we tried to pick some of the easy ones for starters to try to get a tester of it. So some of, I suppose, just one or two thoughts that occurred to me as we went through the process of the workshop. Soren's going to go into detail of what we actually did. One thing that struck me was the semantics. Our Northern Ireland Environment Agency gave us 6 different data sets of protected sites, so areas of special scientific interest, etc. And in each one of those data sets, the date that the site was designated on. These are the 6 different ways that the date was described. So everything from classification to listed to declared, all of these actually mean the date it was declared on. And as Inspire has designated that that's the legal foundation date. These varied, I suppose, due to different people actually creating the different data sets over time. And probably also they were suggesting maybe a bit of influence from Europe at the time for each of the different designations. So trying to pull all of those together. Another one was that often what your own organisation has, I suppose, doesn't really fit with Inspire's definitions and interpretations. For our national address database pointer, we have 7, is it? 1, 2, 3, 1. Should have counted those. 5 different classifications of the data, but they don't actually match directly to, although the terms look quite similar, they don't match directly to Inspire's definitions or provisional, what we classify as a provisional address doesn't exactly fit with Inspire's definitions. So it's not always easy. You don't actually have always have the right, I suppose, attributes to match across. But I think at this point I'm going to hand over to Soren, who's going to talk you through, I suppose, the detail of that, and I'll come back with a little lessons learned slide, I think, from our workshop. Thanks, Soren.
Switch to the next.
That way.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, I will talk about the technical part of the harmonization and also how we proceeded in the workshop. I don't know how many of you have seen the workshop on Saturday, where we presented the general approach to use FME and to transform data into a geodatabase model with a tool that we created, the Inspire Solution Pack for FME, that we used during our we used this tool during our 5-day workshop. So I will now. So the main goals of the workshop were, of course, to do some knowledge transfer. So it was not only about just getting me there to move the data into the geodatabase. It was also about giving the knowledge to the local experts so that they can do this process in the future themselves, or with a little help maybe, but they should, of course, get the knowledge to do most of the process themselves. So there were two things that we had to do knowledge transfer, of course, to the target model, and the other part was FME and the Inspire Solution Pack. So if you understand, have a good understanding of the data model and the tools, then actually there should be nothing that keeps you from transforming your data to Inspire. During the workshop, we harmonized data for addresses, protected sites, administrative units. I think you listed one more. Which? Ah, yes, I forgot the cadastral parcels, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I think most of you probably saw what approach we used. So we are mapping not directly to the Inspire GML, but we use a staging database approach that is based on ArcGIS for Inspire. So the first step is that we actually extract the data from the existing source data sets and transform it into the Inspire geodatabase that Esri provides with ArcGIS for Inspire. And then ArcGIS for Inspire does all the things that you need to publish the data as web services, like the Inspire data download and Inspire view services. So yeah, FME is a spatial ETL tool. I will do this very quickly because I think most of you already heard something about it. In case you need more information, you can also always ask me at our booth or something. So the first step is always, of course, to extract the source data, and you have to do some transformations. So you have to actually manipulate the schema to make the attributes match to the Inspire requirements. Sometimes you also have to merge different data sets. In some cases, you have to do some plausibility checks. I will, for example, have an example in addresses where we found out that some of the addresses that we found in the source data, for example, couldn't be directly matched to Inspire. And then you have good tools to filter these addresses out, have a closer look what is necessary to do with these addresses to make them ready for Inspire. Most of these steps are already automatically possible with FME, so you don't have to do a lot to import a source schema or to load data into the database. This is something that FME already has on board, so to say. Only the schema transformation is a manual process. And to make this more easier, we built a tool, the Inspire Solution Pack, that supports this process. So the approach when you start the mapping is that you start with a template that is part of the Inspire Solution Pack. We also get some new transformers. So everything that you see on the right side are new transformers that are not part of FME in the original product, but that are transformers that we added to FME. And then you integrate your own data and just have to take care of the left side where you specify the mapping process from your source model to the Inspire model. Yeah, I also have some examples from the workshop. So what you see here is one mapping file where we mapped the protected sites. This was for the simple schema. As you can see on the, is there a pointer? Ah, yes. As you can see on the right side here, left side, sorry, here, we are integrating 8 data sets at the same time. So we read. We have special protection areas from Natura 2000, special areas of conservation. I don't know, ASSI is probably areas of special scientific interest, and yeah, I'm not sure if I will be able to tell you what all the others are. I mean, Ramsar is quite clear. Then we have the World Heritage sites here. And then what follows in the process are the different steps that are unique for each of these data sets. So you see on each of these lines we do manipulations like setting the namespaces or that are unique for each of these data sets. And then in the end we have the part that is the same for all data sets, so to say. So all these data sets had different attributes, so we couldn't like handle them in one process line, so to say. So for example, for setting the identifier, the namespace is different from most of these protected sites because we have the designation included. Oh, sorry. We have the designation included in the namespace, for example. Also, the identifiers are different for each of these data sets, and so on and so on. Yeah, this is just another example where we create values for the documentation or for the percentage under designation attribute. And then finally, we write it to the geodatabase table from the ArcGIS for Inspire geodatabase model for protected sites. This consists of 4 tables, at least for the simple schema. The full schema is far more complex. Okay. And the other example that I brought, because I think this is a quite interesting one, is addresses. I mean, it's not really necessary that you see all the transformers and everything. It's more the general approach, because usually you would think that addresses is a very simple annex theme, but the transformation process is not that easy because at least most times when I mapped addresses, this was so far the case in 4 or 5 organizations, it was usually just one database table or one CSV file, and then you have like 1 million of entries in this table, but Inspire requires you to have, for example, in the database or in the model, you have only one instance of, for example, the administrative unit or of the postal code and these kind of things. And that means that you have to do some kind of aggregation where you find the unique values for each of these fields and then create objects from them and create a relational model from this. So this is more of some kind of data, how you say? So it's more a challenge in terms of handling the data, and not so much a challenge of the semantics or a challenge in terms of using FME. It's more a challenge in terms of handling the data, because usually the addresses data sets are quite big. I mean, in this case it was 1 million addresses. It was more? Okay, I thought it was about 1 million. This was still working fine, but we also mapped some data sets with 12 million addresses, and then it can already become a bit tricky. The other thing is, of course, if you have a CSV file, you don't have the geometry with the address, so we had to create the geometry from the attributes, the X and Y coordinates. I mean, this is no problem with FME, so it's only a small step. Okay, and this is one of the examples that Suzanne already mentioned, where we mapped the address status. As you can see, we could map most of these. I mean, it's only a technical way to map it. We cannot really solve semantic problems in this process, of course. Then we have the rejected ones that we can't put to Inspire. So we just filter them out. This is done in a later step, so they get the value filter, and then we filter this out. This is something that we used throughout all the process, so it's already some kind of quality control. Yeah, and then after we run these processes, we also created services from them. So after putting the data into the Inspire geodatabase, we created Inspire view and data download services based on ArcGIS for Inspire. So this is just an example where I loaded some of the protected sites services into our catalog, and then it displayed them with a background map. So this is just how, for example, the protected sites look in the browser, or in the it's this time in our catalog. Yeah, this is just a few numbers about the protected sites. I only put. Oh, okay. So yeah, I think I can skip this. You can just see the numbers. So I think I can hand over back to Suzanne again.
Okay. Well, extremely briefly. I suppose the overall, from the user perspective, the fact that we built a centralised, central, I suppose, transformation services, the advantages, obviously, the big one is that it's a cost-effective solution. The other one is, I think, that then when we have the same people applying the transformations, that we're going to have more consistency in actually interpreting what the data specifications are, because I think you can interpret them slightly different. The main disadvantage, I suppose, that I could come up with was an underestimation of the time and physical resources that we actually need to do all this, especially when we start to get into Annex 3. The lessons learned then, just you really need to know your source detail, or source data, very well. You need the people with the right technical skills, the ability to read and understand the UML models in the inspired data specifications. That your source data isn't always error-free, and when that's not your data, then that's not up to you to fix that, and it's trying to encourage organisations then to go back and fix their data. You need to know the data specifications in great detail, and then a bit like our address, I suppose categories. Sometimes you've got to actually squeeze your data very slightly to fit it into the specifications in order to get it through. And finally, then, as we learned, maybe proceed with caution, as Europe can sometimes change the agreed specifications. As we know, we'll have to revisit our administrative boundaries and potentially put in marine boundaries into that, as I believe that's a potential change. But other than that, it takes time. It's not easy, but I think the tools are there for us all to use it. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stan and Søren. I think we have time for a few questions. Yes. Do you have a microphone, please?
Have you already defined these ETL processes, these schema transformation, for all Annex 1 themes, or only for those who have showed now?
In this project, we only mapped the Annex themes that we just showed, but we have other projects where we already have experience with all Annex 1 themes. So I think we already had about like 30 or 40 data harmonization projects for Annex 1, and I don't know, my colleague Mark Döring has a slide where he shows like all the projects and how many days we spent on them, but I don't know the exact numbers. But if you have any questions about these, you can come to our booth and I can show you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just a quick follow-on that I wanted to ask. I thought it was an interesting approach to get all the relevant data providers in one room for a week and lock yourself away, like you said. Did you have any plans for how to do it for the more complex Annex 1 themes, hydrography, transport networks, and then the Annex 2 and 3?
Yes, well, we're trying to tackle transport at the moment, but what we're trying to do is sort out the political aspects first of the data, and what organisations will feed, what bits of data that we'll actually put into the model, because we want to streamline. We have lots of different roads data sets in Northern Ireland, and we just want to use, we want to stop the duplication, I suppose, as Inspire says. So we haven't got to the transformation point yet. We're still trying to sort out who will provide which
What data,
attributes.
yeah. Okay. There's another question in the back.
You have spoken about the underestimation of the resource, of the fact that it is asking a lot of resource. Can you give an estimate of this resource or the works? For example, according to the number of data sets you have integrated?
Well, I suppose I can give an estimation of the time resource that we're probably, I think maybe for probably each data set, some of the slightly more complex data sets, you're looking at least 2 to 3 days for that data set. So we have 53 for Annex 1, and when we go into hundreds, then that adds up to an awful lot of man hours, and we don't actually have, I suppose, enough staff to be able to cope with trying to do all that. Going to be quite tight to transform all our Annex 1 themes for December, which was our own goal that we're hoping to try to do. But it's on average about 3 days, I think, for a data set. But in some of those data sets, we've identified issues with them. So although we have them transformed, it's not ideal. So we want to go back and change and revamp, I suppose, some of our source data and push it through the workbench again.
So it was more a matter of trying to make the original data source more conformant than just using the tools, and it's more discussion how this data source can be ready to be transformed in a way. So probably this is part of the work which is asking a lot of resource.
True. I think it's, if I understand your question properly, it's an awful lot of it is if you know your source data and you know what the end mapping is, the bit in the middle of mapping them across then becomes quite easy. But it's understanding what aspect, the different schema in your own data set, which one relates to which of the Inspire schema and how. That's the more difficult bit, I think.
Okay.
Once you've got that, then that's what the majority of the 3 days are doing, and then once you know that, it becomes a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. One more quick one, and then I think we have to move on.
Did you find some generic issues for the transformation processes which could be used by others too, like repeating problems which are occurring very often, or standard transformation issues?
No. No, I don't. I mean, there are some open points, like when you have to create the identifiers in the data sets. Most of the national states, they don't have the registry ready, so you cannot register namespaces, or also the registries for the code lists are not there. So these are probably the only things that in a technical, or that affect the technical mapping and could hold you back at the moment. But I think the rest, there were not so many issues. I mean, if you have really, really large data sets, I can remember one workshop where we mapped a huge data set with all the administrative units for all European levels and so on and so on. That is only the time-consuming part. So if you run the data and then you have the workshop that continues on the next day, but you show up at the conference room the next day and the process is still running, then it's kind of a problem. But I think apart from that, not.
Okay, thanks very much again, Susanne and Søren, and welcome the next speaker, please.